Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. I made a spreadsheet. Okay, so kind of got inspired by a thing I saw about somebody talking about how much it would cost to go watch essentially a show from start to finish, for just kind of a ludicrous amount of money if you want to go about it the legal route. And so what I wanted to do was break down the numbers as far as the Ogre series, like as far as how much does it actually cost to go through these games, considering that so many of them don't have official re-releases? We basically have Tactics Ogre Reborn, and that's about all that survived to this day. The vast majority of the series has not actually made it to this point. Basically, the only way is to, go on eBay or something like that. Go pick up the original guides, go pick up the original devices and what have you. Some of which get expensive, some of which maybe, not so much. But either way, as far as all of these different things are concerned, I decided to go through piece by piece and just sort of break down how the numbers look. So here's the situation with the original Ogre Battle. Essentially, what I've done here is I've broken down the cost with the guide, with the different versions, the cost of the console, as well as sort of like a cheapest route, a standard route, and then the like sort of completionist route. And then I guess technically, if somebody wanted to be a complete collector, we'll go ahead and pop that number together at the very end because I just noticed I completely forgot that one. Seems like it'd be an important number. Anyway, so with the original Ogre Battle, we actually have a bit of a consistent trend that ends up forming in terms of the PS1 version essentially being the most expensive for the game, but potentially the cheapest for the console. So essentially, going down the list, for the SNES version, we've got the overall cheapest with 25 for the game itself and 45 for the console. For the PS1, it was typically around 75 for the game itself, including one, I kid you not, that sold for like $60 that was so scratched that it didn't even have any use that they recommended using as a coffee coaster. So that stuff gets unreasonably expensive because it was fairly rare at the time. People didn't buy very much. It kind of got iffy reviews when it first came out because it came out right next to FFT, and they're like, "Oh man, hey look, it's FFT with worse graphics and less mechanics." What about the adaptive story? We don't believe in those yet. Anyway, so yeah, console itself fairly cheap at $40, but as far as the original version, yeah, 75. That's going to be a bit up there. For the Saturn, the actual game itself is pretty cheap at about $20 on average, and then the console itself is about $100. Though it is worth mentioning that Saturns, as far as I've seen, have had a lot more weird hardware issues, so you might have more weird stuff there. Several of them mentioned having issues with the video out in particular, so I don't know how common that is. Not really a big Saturn guy myself, but it does seem like it had some weird complications. That being said, though, yeah, the PS1 version definitely up there in terms of rarity. The other ones are fairly available if you want them, given how niche the overall everything is. From there, this takes us takes us Ogre to Tactics Ogre over the original classic version there. If you wanted the guide, that's about $50. That's relatively rare. The OB guide seemed a bit more available. SNES version of this thing is about $20. Again, console at 45. PS1 version is again fairly rare at $80. Though it is worth mentioning that there are actually differences between these. With the original Ogre Battle version, it was basically the same between all the different versions. Like technically, the Saturn version had a hard mode and technically had recolored sprites that were harder to read, which is an interesting way to go about it. But as far as the game itself goes, yeah, the PS1 version. We're going to see more kind of save options when it comes to the PS1 version. We're going to see generally kind of a more stable performance. And interestingly enough, between the three versions, we actually have different soundtracks, like you're currently listening to the PS1 version right now. However, the reason that I'm focusing on the PS1 version in particular is because it will become relevant to our discussion later. I guess technically there's one more category that we should add to this, but we'll get to that. Anyways, yeah, console is still 40, obviously. For Tactics Ogre Saturn, the game itself is about $20. Again, seems like there were a decent number of copies in circulation, but it is going to be Japanese only. There are translation ROMs available, and we'll get to the costs of potentially translating them into something that you can use on emulators down the road here. Anyway, once we get to Ogre Battle 64, this is, yeah, the guide itself is about $100, and honestly is one hell of a read, considering that so much of its information is completely wrong. But I think mostly people just get it as a novelty, but it is fairly rare at this point. Didn't particularly sell well back in the day, as I understand also. The game itself, though, is surprisingly cheap. On average, I saw it running for about $13 for some reason. I don't know why 13 of all numbers, but whatever, it's about 13 bucks. Seemed relatively uncommon to be available, but it was out there for seemingly consistently cheap. As always, there are going to be some that have a bit of a markup, but it is what it is. And N64s, if you're running for the standard model, are going to be in about the $40 range. That doesn't always include controllers, but it is typically going to be pretty stable there. Personally, I've seen all of the above consoles at garage sales with relative frequency. Honestly, it is worth mentioning these are just kind of more or less average costs as far as being able to find them on eBay. I know personally I've gone and picked up a lot of different consoles over the years, and like I've seen original SNESes and PS1s going for like $10 at garage sales pretty often. Never seen a single Saturn there though, so that's understandable. But yeah, typically you'll find those with all of their stuff, Facebook Marketplace, people's basements, whatever else. It's one of these things that everyone's got laying around collecting dust somewhere. Um, for OB64, same thing. I've seen N64s popping up pretty frequently, especially those original models. If you want one of the transparent plastic ones, yeah, that's going to run you a pretty penny. Those go up to 100, couple hundred, depending on which one it is. From there, we've got the Wii. Now, unfortunately, the Wii had two unique versions. The Wii and technically Wii U, but we're just going to run the Wii for this particular thing. It had two unique versions. They were, as far as I understand, $10 each. This technically also would have been for the 3DS as well, but again, for the sake of simplicity, since these are basically the same unique digital version, that would have been about $10 each. It's kind of irrelevant at this point anyway, because unfortunately they are gone. The only way to get a hold of those versions, as I understand it, would essentially be a Japanese 3DS, and if you happen to have found backups for those. As far as I know, in my personal searches, I have not found backups for those digital versions because they were like just that niche. A lot of people, even in the kind of ogre community, weren't even aware that there were digital versions of these things. Mostly the differences seem to be translation type of stuff, but if anybody happens to have any, digital version or what have you, happens to have some way of backing that up, that it's not out there currently, at least it doesn't seem to be, so if you have any leads, by all means, let me know. Anyway, from there, that gets us over to Tactics Ogre Knight of Lotus. So this is going to be the GBA one. Now, you can find GBAs all over the place, but that's going to be running us about $35 to $40. Give or take, in kind of fairly average condition. You can find pristine, fully modded ones for like 150, 200 if you're feeling, particularly non-thrifty that day. And I've seen beaten up ones running as low as $20, but either way, I'm assuming you're just going to go for a standard GBA on that. I've seen GBSPs running for about $50 on average, and if you want to have an old DS, that'll actually work for this as well. In fact, a busted up fat 3DS, or not 3DS, but regular old DS, the silver kind, you could probably pick up one of those for like 10, $15. They generally are not very popular due to their clunkiness, but I mean, they are thick, but they're weirdly light, and I don't know, there's just something weirdly satisfying about those old chunker models. I'm personally really biased towards those. Yes, they're ugly compared to the later ones, but God, something about that chunk just feels so good. Anyway, the game itself is going to run you about $20. They do get a random markup. Like I've seen some people selling them for 50, 60 bucks, but it seems on average you can probably pick it up for about $20 as far as the game itself. Then from there, that gets us over to Tactics Ogre PSP, which is kind of an interesting one, because you actually can get the games for, well, $10 off of a PS Vita, and then the interesting part is that, yeah, on the Vita, this is actually one of the few versions that still has its original store still running, so it's only Reborn and the PSP version on Vita that you can you can buy digitally at this point. Not on an original PSP, at least some people have mentioned that there's some way to do that. Hasn't worked on any of the PSPs that I've tried. Maybe there's some other trick to it. Not sure. Anyway, if you want the guide for it, it's a fairly interesting guide. People have posted PDFs of that thing online at this point. The original version is like tissue paper thin, so you got to be super careful with that thing. But it's about $50, give or take. It's definitely gotten a markup since Reborn came out. And then additionally, we've got the US version running about $20 for the UMD, and then about $15 for the Japanese version. It is worth mentioning between the two of these, the main difference between the two: the Japanese version, the ninjas get longbows, and there's a few other balance changes, like your base stats go up way the hell faster than they do in the US version. And if you have the original discs and you find ones that have like a cracked case or something, you can actually replace those cases with more sturdy ones these days that are going to be roughly like I think last rate I saw I think was like $10 for a pack of three of them or something like that. They're not too expensive, but they are going to be this weird proprietary format, so there's going to be at least some price on it. But I'm sure somebody's off printing these at whatever quality there or whatever quantity there. But either way, yeah, the original disc cases on those UMDs were pretty garbage. So don't be shocked if you have to replace the case to make it run. But yeah, you can just essentially get if you have a PSP, it's fairly easy to mod. You can just pop the thing on there. If it can even read it once, you can just copy the entire thing as an ISO file to your computer immediately. It's surprisingly easy to do. So yeah, backing up these ones is particularly handy. And One Vision is mentioned on here as a you will go to hell if you don't try this mod, and the rarity is absolutely mandatory, of course. Now, the reason that the Vita is mentioned is because it's kind of in this weird, unique Goldilocks zone as far as the series is concerned, but we'll get to that in a little bit of a moment. It's basically the only console outside of something like a Steam Deck or something that would be able to play all of the games to some degree. But it's the only pocketable console to be able to do all of this stuff. And yes, I am including Retroids because there's a lot of weird emulation jank when it comes to these games that does not play particularly nice with certain things, especially when it comes to the resolution of a lot of emulation handhelds. It specifically has to be a widescreen and even wider than the usual widescreen because PSP format. Anyway, when it comes to Prince of Zenobia, though, yeah, that is. Do I even recommend playing that one? God, no. Just go watch Warren Report's video on the lore on the whole thing, and it's going to be way more interesting than the game itself. But if you wanted the guide, it's $50. If you wanted to pick up Prince of Zenobia, the game, it's $60. The console, though, is the rub there. Like, even a $120 one is still going to come in damaged. Getting ones that are remotely functional is going to be a little bit of an ask. It's kind of a weird thing because yeah, the original Neo Geo Pocket wasn't particularly popular, especially over here. I mean, I never even heard of the NGP until looking up Prince of Zenobia. I kid you not. And as far as the consoles go, I do want to mention. Most of them are something that's going to be relatively easy to fix up. Like PSPs and Vitas in particular are especially super easy to fix up. Like I threw on an extra $10 on the price just for the purpose of having additional pieces and whatnot that you maybe want to replace or upgrade or whatever else. But realistically speaking, they're like a very beginner level repair project. And oftentimes I recommend people to just go buy the damaged versions on eBay, the ones listed for parts, because so many times it's something as simple as they didn't want to buy an extra battery off Amazon or they didn't want to buy a charging cord, and because both of those will be using unique cords, in both those cases you can typically get them for relatively cheap. Like right now, Vitas are at a bit of a high point. Like 70 is about as high as it goes. Like I mentioned, my current one I got for functionally negative because it came with a game, came with a little note that said, "Yeah, this thing is completely destroyed," and it was like, "Oh, I just replaced the screen for $15, and now it's perfectly fine." And then the stuff that it came with, like the old memory card and whatnot, basically sold for more than I bought the thing at auction for. So. So ultimately get the thing plus FF10 for functionally free. So either way, you can get a really good steal on those. I would say it's still generally one of the best values out there as far as I'm concerned. PSPs you can typically find for about $30, sometimes even less. It doesn't really matter if they're US or Japanese. Once they're modded, you can just swap between the two. Anyway, so yeah, and as far as modding them goes, both of them are easy, and both of them are honestly, even if you're going the original legit route, I would recommend modding them just for quality of life stuff, just being able to organize things easier, just be able to fix things like battery sensing glitches and things like that. So either way, they've got incredible communities up to this point, which finally gets us up to Tactics Ogre Reborn, and you can find that on sale for like $20-25, available basically everywhere. The guides are all too readily available. Some dumbass made like 3,000 videos on the thing. And anyway, the consoles themselves range anywhere on the low end for an X-Bone for $70, going up to $300 for a kind of entry-level Steam Deck, though you can sometimes just wait for those to get on sale. Okie dokie. So let's count these numbers. So first of all, the OG route. So this is assuming that you went for the original consoles, relatively cheap on the original consoles. You wanted to get the guides along with them. You want to have the sort of the classic experience in total. That would bring you up to $828, which is certainly not exactly very cheap. But we get the more standard route here, available for about $583. This is if you decide to skip the guides, you only go for the cheapest versions. You skip on buying additional versions. This is the cheapest combination of game and console, which will end up kind of all over the place. But overall that would end up at about 583. Now we could argue about whether or not you have particular consoles. I'm assuming this is like somebody starting completely from nothing. Assuming it's just somebody who picks it up one day. Oh, what's an ogre thing? Well, I've got $2,000 to burn. We'll get to that in a moment. There's that. And then from there, we move on to the Collector's Premium version. So this is going to assume that somebody picks up all of the different consoles, all the different versions, all the different guides, wants to try every single version out as you go along, skips the Vita route entirely, doesn't like One Vision because they're just that much of a purist, and this brings the grand total up to $1,553 to experience the entire series that way. But then I want to point out why exactly I like the Vita route. So this is... You might be saying, wait, you're just going to go talk about emulation. Not exactly. So this is technically kind of sort of a little bit, but this is why I consider this console to be the most convenient thing. Entry cost, it's probably the third highest as far as consoles go in this particular list. So the Vita, again, goes up and down in price depending on a lot of different factors. Whenever they get more popular, whenever they drop in popularity. Every time a new port comes out to the thing, they go up in popularity a bit. But typically, I'd say you can comfortably pick one up with relatively minor repairs for like $50, okay? If you wanted to just buy one fully kitted out, all ready to go, fully modded with its SD to Vita and, whatever else, with a replacement screen and whatever else already in place, you can get that for like $130. And honestly, at this point, that's not even that bad of a deal. Like, it's one that I will always stick to as far as just like, I'm gonna buy this for dirt cheap when it's dirt cheap and fix one up and find a friend who wants one. And, this is a nifty little handheld that I think never really got the love it deserved. But the cool thing about it is that we've got native like PlayStation support of all kinds of unique varieties, including interesting upscaling that works particularly well with Tactics Ogre PSP. If you are somebody that does videos, it does video out through a USB cable, and all of this stuff is relatively easy to set up. Additionally, we have emulation options for basically everything on this list and remote play available for Tor. So with everything included, including buying a PS4, the Vita route in this particular case would actually come up with a surprisingly cheap $480 if you went for all of it, and this is including cart dumpers. So while it's not the perfect solution, it is the most convenient, I think. So essentially what this route consists of is that somebody would, let's say, go and pick up, OB PS1, okay? We aren't taking the actual sort of like PS1 itself into account here, so we'll just go ahead and put that into bold over here, just to maybe just bold italicize it. What sticks out more? Okay, whatever. We'll put bold and italics for the Vita route, as it were. So you just need the disc. So you get the disc, you get this as well, so you get the PS1 version of each of those. For OB64, you would just need the game itself, as well as the cart dumper, so that's going to be down here. Cart dumpers for the N64 are about $20. Same thing for the SNES cart and stuff like that. We skipped the Wii entirely, unfortunately. I would like to try those versions, but it's just not possible right now. You get a copy of KOL, and additionally, I put in an additional $15 in there for the purpose of picking up a chunky DS, because that's all you need to dump Night of Lotus. So again, just kind of throw one in there, and then from there we can pick up both of the versions of Tactics Ogre, the Japanese and the US version, and additionally we'll be putting on One Vision because we're a sensible human being who enjoys joy. And then from there we've got Prince of Zenobia. Now, I've decided that we're just going to skip that because, again, we have better options. I think I did count this into the total, so I'm going to go ahead and italicize it, but if you're a sensible human being, just skip it. Anyway, we also have Tor, and I also included the cost of getting a PS4 in here. And so, in total, if I did the math right, that gets us up to about $480 here. Because essentially what you would do is you would dump the versions for the PS1 version using your PC. You would... actually, yeah, come to think of it, then I have it $5 too high because I included the cost of a cart dumper for that, whatever. You know what? We'll just assume you have an extra five in there for getting a slightly chunkier 3D, not 3DS, but regular DS. Okay, so this is actually including the cost of the Vita. This is including the uh, this is including the kind of relative dumpers that you need for all of this stuff. But yeah, so you would essentially dump the PS1 versions, even though they are the most expensive games. You wouldn't need the console in this case. OB64, again, you would need the game, but not the console. You can just use a dumper for that. For Night of Lotus, you again don't need the console. You can just dump it using a regular old chunky DS. And then Prince of Zenobia, again, I would generally not recommend even. I just want to take that off the list. You know what? Forget it. Just get you off there. Let me double check the math on this to make sure I got it right. I feel like on principle we need to skim Prince of Zenobia because it's just not an enjoyable game. I don't know. Hold on. Yeah, I did the math wrong somewhere along those lines. But anyways, it ends up being roughly 388 if we decide to skip Prince of Zenobia. Again, I might have just double counted something before, but still, it's dramatically cheaper to go down that particular route and a lot more convenient. Reason being that it's a lot more convenient is you can run all of the above. You technically could go even cheaper with this. Like if you didn't want to do the PS1 versions, you could shave a good chunk off of that by going for the SNES versions of like Ogre Battle and whatnot as well. Seeing as you do have SNES emulators that can run at pretty good quality at this point, at basically full speed and whatever else, with everything else all nice and running on a Vita. So you could technically get this as low as like 300-ish. If you were to go down that route. I personally prefer the PS1 versions, but, we can go ahead and say anywhere, maybe even, what would that take off here? About like roughly $80 that it's taken off of there, so whatever. It's going down to about $300 here, okay? This is a weird sales pitch for the Vita, and I know I'm going to give somebody a headache with all this scrolling up and down. Sorry, I'm fidgety some days, okay? And this is, again, including the price of a PS4 for 100 of that. So overall, yes, that is why I like running the Vita for this stuff. But so that is more or less about that. So the series itself, if you decide to go full bore, like full completionist, friggin' expensive. If you decide to go convenient little, pocket handheld, then you can potentially get it down to about $300, and you're still technically playing everything legit. I mean, officially speaking, emulation is not against any rules as long as you did the whole thing legit, and doing it yourself is fairly easy at this point. Like, you just, pop a disc into a system and just get what you need to out of that thing. PS1 stuff in particular is easy. Cart dumpers are even easier. So, you do you. That'll be about that, though. So I hope this was at least somewhat interesting. And, yeah, I will see you in the next one. See you then. Bye.